もし外れだったらボルックス書いてやる。あそこだな。
やだ、も
う。Zephon, a 4X turn-based game about Cyberpunk versus Cthulhu versus the military-industrial complex. How did we get here? I'll explain later, but the basic setup is aliens invade the planet as they herald the coming of a being known as the Voice, corrupting the planet and its inhabitants into a bunch of Resident Evil-style monstrosities, and no, not the hot ones. Humanity already losing the fight unleashes Zephon, a super AI made to analyze the situation, take control of the facilities, and declare humanity as acceptable collateral. Oh shit! So, fearing total extinction, humans flee the surface world, spend a couple hundred years underground, run out of food, pop out of their holes, and
everyone in McKinney is dead.
The aliens lost, their remnants are stuck on Earth, Zephon has gone mildly more crazy over the decades, and you need to pick a side, or don't, in order to take back the surface for the remnants of humanity. Pretty good premise. Personally speaking, I think the Cthulhu faction could use some of that good old Japanese horny spice, but that aside, as a 4X game, what you generally expect is what the namesake entails. Explore, expand, exploit, and exterminate. You land on a map full of unknowns, place down a base of operations, build it up with resources you gathered from the surroundings, and slaughter any opposition you come across during the process.
Map painting.
Tastes like happiness.
What I think deserves the main focus here though is how smooth the gameplay feels, and how it captures the essence of the mythical one more turn factor, the true secret sauce of any turn-based tactics game, and how my 1 hour of gameplay turned into 65 hours in a concerningly short amount of time.
What year is it?
This game has you controlling both small infantry squads as well as larger single entity units that you will send out to take control of key resource points and skirmish with the hostile factions on the map. But despite eventually controlling 20 or 30 units in a single turn, it never feels like a slog to give them all commands, as the game allows you to queue up several turns worth of movement in advance, as well as allowing the units to perform actions simultaneously as long as their targets don't overlap. This can create quite the spectacle, seeing your army all marching around the map at the same time, or a group of gunmen letting loose on a set of hostiles. Though it's more noticeable and saves a lot of time on the AI's turn. That's the real magic, as many strategy games can have you waiting ages for the enemy to move all their pieces like a bad chess player.
Today, Junior!
Base building also contributes to that one more turn feel, as you queue up expansions to your cities and fill them up with different buildings that deploy vehicles or scan for hostiles, or more commonly just generate generic resources. It's kind of mesmerizing to look at the map and think about what expansions would be the most efficient for your goals without it needing to be so complex that you end up spending more attention to spreadsheets than the cool ass skirmish going on in the middle of the map. Not enough population to run your factories?
Build a house.
And if that don't work,
Build more house.
I'd actually compare the gameplay a lot to an RTS, since the game lacks the fluff a lot of 4X games have. If you're just trying to figure out the vibes of that genre, this game functions pretty well as a baby's first RTS, with things like searching for and holding capture points, churning out versus carefully maintaining your troops, and even the decision of using complex tactics versus raw numbers to topple the enemy factions. All that without the pressure of doing it in real time weighing on your soul. One thing that RTSs tend not to be as great on, or at least many of the modern RTSs I've been looking at, is unit variety. But despite Zephon only having 3 factions, I think the devs did a pretty good job with making interesting looking and animating units, with a mix of boots on the ground infantry as well as larger and more fantastical units. And to showcase that, let's start with the most generic faction of the 3. Their infantry is pretty much what you'd expect, generic gun-wielding soldiers whose tech upgrades are exciting things like grenades, and more grenades, and more bodies to throw the grenades. But But jokes aside, even this early you start to see the developers' creativity with rocket troops who don't actually hold their launchers and instead command robotic companions that carry the rockets for them. As you advance up the tech trees, you eventually unlock these badass looking advanced warfare soldiers who may or may not be legally distinct recreations of another popular IP. But that's just the infantry. Like I said earlier, there are also single entity units. And in the military's case, they get a nice assortment of planes and bombers, but more importantly, they get tanks. They get big tanks, small tanks, anti-air tanks, artillery tanks. They even get research projects that add buffs and change the in-game model of the tanks. A cool little feature that all units share, but honestly feels a bit underutilized outside of the military faction. Anyway, if you like tanks, you like these guys. And for my dedicated audience, you should look out for the artillery tank, which is driven by a woman who sounds like she enjoys her tank's big gun a little bit more than most.
I thought you'd never ask. You've never seen a light show like this.
If I could ask for anything from this faction, it would probably be add a Cortana.
I thought you'd never ask.
Come on, you already basically have the UNSC, throw a dog a bone and add a half-naked AI waifu to the mix. I know that's literally the first step to ending up with another Zephon, but realistically, I just hope they double down on the traditional infantry with an interesting twist. Power armored soldiers are cool and all, but if Helldivers 2 has taught me anything, it's that regular men and women fighting the good fight can be pretty awesome if you give them the right equipment.
Oh, we are the valiant infantry. We are the alpha team with passion and camaraderie.
Hear us as we shout at the top of our lungs. Be calm, be bold, and raise your guns.
Valen! Whoa, hey!
The corrupted voice faction units are admittedly not my cup of tea, but not for a lack of trying, because they're not just shambling monstrosities, they're shambling monstrosities with laser miniguns, cavalry riding spearmen, fire-breathing dragons, and even a Left 4 Dead tank that uses its digestive tract like a cannon. Hell, what almost got me was the transport unit, which is this four-armed crawler that carries units in a freaking hammock strapped to its undercarriage. Despite being someone who prefers their cosmic horrors to be more on the bangable side, I have to appreciate the creativity here that comes together to make a very fun melee-oriented faction. Oh baby, the brooding edgelord skirmish infantry, the ASMR AI hover vehicles, the cute tiny sniper drones, the assassin hero that sounds suspiciously like Tali from Mass Effect.
Now's the time to make my mark.
Still totally worth it.
Speaking of Mass Effect, they even got Reapers.
I am assuming direct control.
Man, this faction is perfect, and as you ascend the tech trees, it has this general vibe of sleek insectoid style robots that I didn't even know I needed until now. Like, they are so good that I went out of my way to read the bios of some of the creatures.
I want this thing gone.
It's pretty good. I mean, why not take the corpses of fallen soldiers and reanimate them with unstable tech that is reflected in the gameplay by them taking damage whenever they attack? 10 out of 10, add some horny sci-fi shit and I will love this development studio forever.
Get out of my house!
I say that as a joke, kinda, but there is a cute AI waifu in the game already as one of the faction leaders.
I'm the Tentacles, yes.
The game has 8 of them currently, with each one having unique gameplay bonuses, quests, and tech to research. The Cyber faction in my opinion has the best leaders, no bias there, with the most interesting gameplay one being the aforementioned AI waifu who is locked inside a single base, creating this experience of making a single megacity that just so happens to also have a freaking railgun on its roof as a unique way to defend itself. Another unique faction is the Rogue Operative.
I'll make you an offer. Good offer.
Who is kind of the opposite, encouraging the player to create a number of smaller specialist cities, as well as all of her units having the ability to move after attacking, which changes up your strategy significantly. The stranded aliens in Zephon itself also appear on the map as AI-only mini-factions, as well as a Mad Max-style set of humans who were abandoned on the surface.
Pity little-hearted do-gooder.
On your way.
What is pretty cool is that they have a few unique units only accessible to them unless you use diplomacy to purchase them. Now, the diplomacy in the game isn't all that advanced. It's generally guided by your faction's inherent relationships to another faction, but it can be nudged a bit in the direction of your choosing by either gifting a lot of resources or nuking the enemy's base into oblivion. Either way, it does unlock alliances with a useful go here button that seems slightly more reliable than other games I've tried. So how did we get here? Well, fun story. In the last couple of years I've become something of a Warhammer fan, specifically fantasy for obvious reasons. Skipping forward a bit, I then decided to expand my horizons and finally try out 40k. But ran into the wall of a literal endless pile of video games spanning its entire history. So I laser focused on one thing. I want to play Space Dark Elves and Sisters of Battle. Now I really enjoy Gladius, for many of the same reasons I laid out here for Zephon. Mechanically, Zephon is a spiritual successor to Gladius, with many of the ideas in that game iterated upon and improved for this newer title. Gladius has the combat-focused 4X gameplay, the awesome and unique units, as well as the factions stemming from an IP that has grown over 30 years. Honestly, between Gladius and Dawn of War, I can begrudgingly admit, I get it.
Next time, baby.
I can see beyond my personal desire for half-naked space babes and see why so many people like the Space Marines. Still like fantasy more, dark elf titties abound, but I get it. So why am I not covering Gladius today? DLC fatigue. Gladius has a lot of it, space elf and church titties are $15 each, and I'm just not about it for now.
I'm broke, nigga, I'm broke!
But having played base Gladius and Zephon, that gives me some insight that I want to share, because I do think overall that Zephon has a ton of potential, but I understand why Gladius review count is here,
The power of the press triumphs!
while Zephon's is here.
Tell her not to open the caviar.
First off, it's Warhammer. Again, 30 years of content coming from a company that had to solve the literal million-dollar question of how do I convince people to buy a collection of plastic dolls at these prices. Zephon's factions are pretty good, but as unfair as it is, having only 3 of them does leave the game at a disadvantage in terms of sheer visual variety. Zephon tries to even the odds a bit with allowing the factions to, with the proper research, recruit the other factions' units, but I do sort of agree with some critics that it kinda just waters down the uniqueness of each faction if you do that. My hot take is that they should expand on the unit upgrade system and add some unique faction crossover upgrades to add the main faction's flavor to the borrowed units. The next thing to bring up is the price, because it's a bit more complicated than just saying Zephon cheaper than fully kitted out Gladius. I mean, it is, but if you're selective on what DLCs you get, you can take advantage of Gladius's base price, which when on sale, goes down to $3. Despite being a complete package, I think Zephon has to find a way to compete with Gladius's deep discount, because I could have gotten both the DLCs I wanted for roughly the price of Zephon, resulting in a game with 6 really unique factions against a game with only 3. Where Zephon wins out big though is its overall visual quality and its quest design. Visual quality is a given, considering that this is a newer game made with newer technology. Though I will point out, I was disappointed that the game did not run buttery smooth on the Steam Deck like Gladius does. The quest design though is pretty important, considering that neither game has a traditional single player campaign. That is fair. Normally I pass on games without single player campaigns, as it hints at the title being more multiplayer focused. But the Gladius formula seems to be trying something different, mixing a light campaign into the standard skirmish game mode. It's a single quest chain that gives a basic sequence of events to the player's factions, with enemies, loot drops, and even some simple bosses. In comes Zephon, which iterates upon that concept, adding random events to your cities, choices to make with varying outcomes, some more important than others.
What?
and culminating to an in-game crisis that gives each playthrough an explosive finale.
Today we face the monsters that are at our door and bring the fight to them. Today we are canceling the apocalypse.
And that even includes unlockable game modifiers that reward you for completing a match. All that together is what I think edges out the value proposition in Zephon's favor. Sure, it doesn't have the sheer bulk of factions that Gladius has, but it does feel more like a complete video game. To wrap things up, Zephon is an interesting 4X game, especially for anyone who wants that sort of combined arms RTS style gameplay, but in a more digestible turn-based package. My biggest hope is for the devs to eventually break the three-way tie the game is thematically built around and introduce a fourth faction into the mix to add more value compared to its 40k big brother. A slightly smaller hope is for the devs to hopefully iterate on their DLC plans compared to Gladius and maybe throw in a free content update here or there, again just to bump up that value compared to its sometimes $3 predecessor. My smallest hope though is for some moderately horny Cyberpunk goodness.
That was a joke.
But even without that, the game is fun. I'm really just doing my part for highlighting a game that deserves a larger reception than it currently has.
I'm doing my part.
So if you stuck around till the end, thanks for listening. Maybe I'll eventually get those DLCs and cover Gladius proper. But for now, I'll see you guys next time. Matane.